Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I am coming back at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In today's video, we're going to continue working on my 15mm terrain for MeG. And in today's video, I had a fairly large amount of people ask me how I'm going to do this, so I've decided to go ahead and show you guys. We're going to be working on a vineyard, right? We're going to be working on a vineyard today. What I've done is I've gotten a piece of MDF and I've beveled the edges with my box knife, just whittled it down. I rounded the edges with my jigsaw, and that's the board we're going to be working with. And after applying some dark earth, and I use a little bit of the Vallejo dark earth as well, and I kind of just put it on there haphazardly in the center area, so you can see it's kind of got a little bit of a two-tone look. But primarily it was the AK dark earth for the entire thing. Okay, and so that's what we're going to start with. Now what I plan to do is I've got these jumbo popsicle sticks. I deliberately got the 8-inch ones because this board here is almost 11 inches, or it's right at 11 inches, which is pretty close to 7 base widths in MeG. So I'm going to be putting a hedgerow around the outer edge to kind of contain the field. I'm not going to flock or do any grass or anything like that in the center, right? I am going to put grass around the outside edge so it'll blend with the table. But inside the hedges, I was going to make rows of vines, or like and these would have to fit within the hedge, which 8 inches is perfect, because what does that leave? That leaves approximately 1.5 inches on both sides. That's an infantry base in MeG, and it's 40mm this way, but it's only 20mm this way. So it only needs 20mm. And then I'm going to put the hedge and then the popsicle sticks. So I need to make sure and see this is the hedge material that I'm going to be using. I have these scouring pads, but I have them in the light tan as well. Not just green, but tan. So there's going to be a hedge that tall. No, there's going to be a hedge here, and then there's going to be a hedge here with enough room for the figures. So basically, a hedge. There's going to be hedges on this side, but what's really important is the length, not the width, because I can put this as close to the side or as far from the side as I want. And when I build these, I'm going to build these fairly close together. Like that. These can be spread out quite a bit. That's no problem. Now I'm going to use the same dark earth on these, and so these will blend with this, even though I will put a little bit of grass underneath the rows. And that's basically how we're going to organize the positioning. The individual rows of vines, you're going to need a number of toothpicks. Now, I've got square toothpicks, I've got round toothpicks. I'm using diamond, but you can use any toothpicks. These are round, okay? Because the poles that are going to be holding up the vines are round. They could be square. I don't know. Now, I tried finding like a dowel rod that would be thin enough to be a pole, and then I was just going to cut it down multiple times and make a bunch of little poles. But I couldn't find a dowel that was small enough, so I'm going with toothpicks. I thought about using wire because you can get very thin wire, you can get super thick wire, but I was afraid that the wire would look too perfect, like too straight. These toothpicks can be distressed, so I can take like clippers or pinchers, and I can go through and I can squeeze them and make them irregular. But to be honest, I don't think I need to do that. I just think I need to have some poles, and they can be perfect. And then, so now the height of my vineyards, I want them to be taller than a man. So I was thinking somewhere around 10 feet, a 10-foot pole. So what is that? If 15 millimeters is supposed to be about 6 feet, it's actually about 5'5". So a 10-foot pole would be almost 30 millimeters. All right, guys, I've decided we're going to stick with a 25 millimeter. And partially because when I was in Macedonia, I went on a number of patrols through the countryside, and I had an opportunity to run through some orchards, and these orchards, vineyards, I should say, they had these wooden frames, and looking back on it, I think that if I raised my hand, I could probably do a small little jump and touch the cabling, and so I think it wouldn't have been 10 feet, because I can't jump 10 feet. Okay, so I got my little hobby saw here. I could probably take clippers and do it a lot faster. I could probably take an X-Acto knife. I could probably just break it with my hands. But I want it to be a little bit more perfect. I don't have enough pole to do, actually I do. It looks like I might have enough pole to do now. You don't have to cut it all the way through, gentlemen. You just need to give it about a half a cut. Because I'm going to break the rest. I'm just going to break it. There we go. So we got a little bit of a cut. Oh, okay. So when I break it, I got a little trash right here. Okay, so now on one of these sticks, we're going to have a Vineyard pole. Stop with the Velcro, dang. We're going to have a pole there and a pole there, obviously. So it looks like about 5 poles per stick. I'm just visualizing. Okay, it looks like we're going to have about 5 poles per stick. Alright, so now that we've got the poles done, I need to use my pin vise. I've got a drill bit that's approximately the same size as those, and I'm going to drill out little starter holes so that I can glue these into that. But maybe I should tighten up my pin vise a little bit better. And what is my mantra of building terrain? Nothing's perfect. I'm not even measuring it. I'm just eyeballing it. Eyeball it. Now, on the flip side, okay, that one went all the way through. On the flip side, this is man-made. This vineyard isn't a natural occurrence, right? So theoretically, the farmer could have measured to see where all of his poles are going. Okay, they've all got their holes drilled. 5 holes per stick. Okay, so now basically simple enough. We're just going to put a drop of glue on each of these holes. Okay, and then you poke it in, but if it goes all the way through, just push it back out, and if there's any like wood residue or anything like that, just take your X-Acto and straighten it out. So then you got one pole. And you don't have to have a huge amount of glue, mainly because I'm going to put texture paste over this entire thing, and which is effectively going to glue it down. And then I'm also going to flock it. And so when I flock it, I will have a tendency to put flock around the bottom of the, or the base of the pole. There you go. Just push it back up a little bit so it's not sticking out the bottom. Okay. And then you get a stick with 5 poles sticking up. Okay, so I'm going to leave this to dry, and while I do that, I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these. Alright, so now we got all the poles, planted, ready for the vines. But now what we're going to do is we're going to set that off to the side, and we're going to let this tacky glue dry. And I'm going to use my extra sticks as a measuring tool, right, for when I plant this hedge. Now this is going to be a field hedge, so I am going to flock it, but I'm also going to use clump foliage in and around it to give it more volume. But the height is going to be pretty tall, actually. Not a full 15 millimeters, not a full like over their head, but it is going to be fairly tall. And of course, guess what I'm doing? Eyeballing it. Now these long pieces, I'm going to cut 4 of them, 1 for each side. And then I'm probably going to have to cut some short pieces. So these hedges are going to go something like that. Probably won't need that, because that should be enough for both of these sides. There we go. And I cut it because I didn't want to fold it around the edges, if that makes sense. Okay, so if you could imagine infantry deployed at the edge of the base, having a hedge behind them. Might have to break out my pen. Okay, and there is a little bit of a gap. The reason why, remember, there's going to be clump foliage. And then the base, the vineyard itself. And this can go all the way up to the edge of the popsicle stick. I mean, all the way up to the hedge. But again, there's going to be clump foliage on both sides. And then I'm kind of eyeballing the other side. Okay, it looks like there's going to be more than enough room. Okay, so what I need to do now, well, I can draw on the outside because that's where the grass is going to be. Okay, I'm going to make sure I got all 4 sides drawn in, and then I'll be right back. Alright, now using my tacky glue, stick that down Now on the second one, I'm actually going to put some glue on the side and press it up against the other hedge, just to give both hedges a little bit more sturdiness. Plus, when I go to flock it, there's going to be glue getting mixed in with that as well. I'm going to cut a little bit off of this. So that when I lay this corner in, there's going to be a hole. And this side has the big gap, so it's not opposites. I did it like here and here. Okay, so there's the outer perimeter for the orchard, vineyard. I keep saying orchard, vineyard. So those guys are going to be able to lay in there nice and neat. Either way, plus troops, one rank of troops can go along the edge of the map, edge of the board. If it's multiple ranks, you would just put it on the inside of the fence hedge. Okay. So I can set this off to the side so it can dry. Those are drying. I think that's all I can do on the vineyard until the glue dries. I do plan on priming those before I do any kind of texturing or anything, because the thread and the poles are all going to get painted, and I want to have them primed, but I don't want to put like a texture paste down and then prime, because then they'll ruin the texture paste. So I'm going to wait for it to dry, prime it, then put the paste on it. Well, actually, I'm going to let it dry. We'll do the strings that I'm going to do. Then we'll prime it. When this dries, we'll do the grass along the outer edge, and the foliage for the hedge. But I guess all that's going to have to be done tomorrow. So I'm going to set this to the side, let the glue dry, and we'll come back tomorrow. For you, just be a minute or two. All right, guys, we are back. Everything is dry so far as we speak. We've got the hedges. They're nice and sturdy and dry, so we can go ahead and flock the hedge and then get to flocking the outer perimeter. But I'm going to set this off to the side because I can do that while we're waiting for some of this to actually dry, because I've got another step that I have to glue on. We're going to use thread to lay out the suspension harness, or the suspension ropes that go across the vineyard. And we're going to do those one at a time. So now I've got a couple of spools of thread. It doesn't matter what color thread you use, because we are going to spray prime this once I get it done. Okay, so on these suspension ropes, I'm going to do it in two levels, one right in the middle and then one close to the top. Okay, now you can expect there to be a little bit of wastage when it comes to your thread. The first thing we're going to do, and the scissors, you just clip off whatever the wastage is, like any extra dangly cords. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just tie a simple knot about halfway up. Okay, pull it nice and tight. So, all right, now to help keep it from unraveling when you pull on it or stretch it out, I'm going to put a drop of super glue where the thread meets the wood. It's just a very small little piece, just a little drip. And then pull the thread nice and tight. All right, now I take my thread and I'm going to wrap it around the next pole. Just basically just one little wrap. At about the same height. You can do a double wrap if you want. Let's go ahead and do a double wrap. As a double wrap will make the connection between the thread and the pole, it'll look a lot thicker. Now, using your X-Acto knife, I probably should have did this before I started threading, was just to make a little groove in the end of your stick and then drive the thread down into the groove. It's like at the end of the pole, the farmer ran a rope to the bottom to keep it from falling over. I'm going to do the same. Whoops. I'm going to put a drop of glue on that as well. And I will eventually go through and put a drop of glue on all the connections. But I need to do that on this end as well. There you go. This is a great way to do barbed wire as well. Okay, so each end has a little bit of glue on it, and I'm just going to put a touch of super glue on each connection. Not a lot. What am I doing? And then we'll cut the thread. So you do have, well, yeah. So you do have a little bit of thread dangling from here and here, but once everything's dry, you'll be cutting that off. Okay, now this is only the first layer. I'm going to let that dry just for a second while I do that again around each pole, keeping it nice and snug. You don't want to pull too hard because you don't want to warp your popsicle stick with pressure, and you also don't want to break any of these toothpicks. You know, they're possibly a little bit more fragile than you would think. Okay. A little glue there. And then we cut it off. All right, we got a second Vineyard. Now, remember, this is only the first layer. Let me do the rest of these before we move on to the next step. All right, so we take one of our rows that we've already got the first layer of thread. I know the thread is like super hard to see, but what we'll do is I'll zoom in on this in focus once I get them threaded. So I notched out one side right here to this first pole, and then the last pole I'll notch out the opposite side. There we go. And then we basically do the exact same thing that we did with the first ones. Now we do this closer to the top, almost all the way to the top. Nice and snug. And then we put a drop of super glue. And then we take it and we wrap it around the poles within like 2 millimeters of the top. Or 3 in the case of that pole. Okay, and then on the last one, I've run it down to the hole. Or the slit that I made. Put some glue on all the poles where the thread wraps. Put a little glue on that slot. Run the thread in nice and snug. And there you go. You got 2 rows. Let me put this off to the side and let me finish those, and then we'll be back with some close-ups. Okay, so they'll wind up looking a little bit like this, right? So you've got, I don't know if my focus is working here. Here we go. right, with some ends. Now I did want to show one that, here we go, this one. And you can see that the last one, how the thread kind of went, or I don't know if you can see that, I don't know, the backdrop. Okay, I'm going to try to put it against my, yeah, you can't see that. There we go. How that last pole, how it kind of angles down to the last pole. I thought that was a unique look. You can also see how the supports go down to the sides. Now, of course, all the additional threads that are hanging off haven't been cut yet. But that's because that super glue does take a few minutes to dry. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and flock the hedge. And of course, I'm going to be using my flowery meadow. Okay, so we got the Elmer's completely applied. You can see a lot of the brown shining through, which is perfectly acceptable. It's exactly what I was kind of wanting. Because remember, this is going to have clump foliage on it as well. Okay, so now we're just going to press into the glue very softly, very gently. Now when I applied the glue, I paid particular attention to the joints. You know, where two hedges met, either in the middle of a straightaway or the corners. Okay, now while there's a little excess flock on the hedge, I'm going to let that Elmer's dry before I shake any of that off. Alright, so now these guys have a bunch of threads hanging off of them, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to cut all those off. There we go. Using my scissors, trimmed it nice and neat. Let's go ahead and trim all of these, and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so the next step is to take your frames and we're going to hang some vines for the vineyard, right? We're going to hang some hanging vines, and I'm going to use this fast grab tacky glue. You can use any glue that you would like. I'm going to do about 2 vines per section. You can do more or less. Alright, so now what I'm doing here is putting a little glue on each of the cables, one above the other. And I'm going to do this on all the sections now, so I don't have to do it one at a time. Okay. And then I'm taking another color of thread, mainly just to make it easy for you to see exactly what I'm doing. But I'm going to cut about 1.5 inches strands. I need 8 of them. And this is just an estimate. It's all right. And then we take each of these thread strands and we just lay it on the cabling, but make sure it's long enough that it looks like it would reach all the way to the ground. Okay, so now we've got all these binds hanging from the frame, and this tacky glue does take a minute to dry. So we're going to set that off to the side and let that dry. All right, let me do the rest of these, and I will be right back. Okay, so all of the Vineyard sections have the orange thread connected to the top and bottom cross threads. I have to let that completely dry because I am going to be tugging on it a little bit to straighten it out, and so I've got to let that completely dry. I think we got a good coat. This is my static grass and stone mix. I think I just hit the microphone. Yeah, all this week I've been working on terrain pieces for MeG. So if you want to go check out those other videos, I've got some live streams where I worked on some stuff on live, and then I've got some videos where I did like editing. Now the glue on the hedge might not be completely dry. So if some of this grass sticks to the hedge, that's fine, because remember we're going to be doing some clump foliage on the hedge as well. Okay, so with it completely covered, I'm going to take my thumb here and just pat it down a little bit into the glue. Okay, and then I'm going to take my pinky, and I'm going to drag it across where the path was. So it gets a little bit of the glue on my pinky. And it drags some of the static grass out of there. And do the same thing over here. Here we go. Now I'm got to let this soak into the glue, let it dry a little bit before I shake it out. Alright guys, so we are going to dust off the flock here off of the what would we call this? The garden? What do you call a field that has a vineyard inside of it? Do you just call it the vineyard? All right. All right, so we've got the makings of a vineyard. Let me go ahead and clean up this flock, and then I'll be right back. All right, so now the next step, that before we start gluing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the scissors here and trim off any of the excess. But I got to be careful not to cut the wrong thing or whatever. Basically just the excess thread. And it's okay if a little bit of it sticks up. Just like that. So it's not like dangling off the top. Okay, so let me cut all those and then we'll start gluing. Okay, all the tops have been cut off. And you can see that I've got like all this little thread hairs from all of the, basically those are the vines. So let me go ahead and clean this up just a little bit. Okay, so these are not hanging vines. They're not like growing from the cable down. They're actually growing up from the dirt, the ground. So what I need to do is I need to glue the end of the thread to the popsicle stick, and I need something that's going to grip and hold it almost instantly. So I was thinking I was going to use super glue. Now I have super glue gel, but I don't think that's necessary. Okay, so I don't know if you can see the threads and how they hang down. So what I'm going to do is put like a little bead of glue directly underneath. Now, this vine doesn't have to be straight up and down, right? It can go at a curve or an angle or straight up and down would be nice, but it's not necessary. Okay, so now all the vines are growing up out of the popsicle stick up to the cross strings, and I have to do all of those, and then we also have to let it dry. Okay, so I left autofocus on to see if it'll actually work this time. But what I'm trying to do here is glue the thread vines dangling down, and then also the base of the vines I glued to the post or the popsicle stick, so that it looks like it's actually growing up out of the ground. Now, if the thread was extremely long, what I did was I just laid it down. Here's a really good example. I just laid it down on the popsicle stick so that once I put the texture on there, it's going to cover that that thread. So the thread's not going to look like it goes down and under the texture. It's just going to look like it goes down into the ground. Okay, so before we can move on to the next step on this, I do need to let this these sticks dry, the thread. So while we're waiting for that to dry, I can continue to work on the perimeter, and I have some clump foliage right here. So what I plan to do, and I'm just going to put some glue down a couple of different areas, and then I'm just going to press I don't know if this is called fine or what, but I've got some clump foliage that's much larger. It's like big chunks of clump foliage. And that's not what this is. This is like almost shredded, or, very much smaller. And I'm going to do that on the inside and the outside, just to give that a little bit more wilder look to it. So let's take a look at the outside. Now, I don't want to do too much on the outside, because I want to be able to have figures able to fit between the hedge and the edge. Here we go. And I am kind of pushing it down into the glue, but it's also compacting it. All right, let me do the clump foliage on this entire thing. We'll come back. The stick should be dry by then. Okay, so now we got those wild bushes all around the outer edge of the hedge, right? And so this is more than what's going to stick. I basically just put a little extra and I was pushing it in, but once it dries, I'm going to go over it with a brush and knock off all the excess clump clump foliage on the inside and out. And so I just need to let this sit off to the side and dry while I work on the other poles. All right, well, this needs to be primed twice. I need to, mainly because I don't want the popsicle sticks to end up warping. So what I plan to do is prime the bottoms and then prime the top. All right, so give me a second while I go take these outside. And it's raining outside, so there's a lot of moisture. So I don't know if I'm going to prime it outside and then bring it inside to dry, or if I'm going to, yeah, I probably will. Yeah, it's cold, wet, rainy, and so I decided to go ahead and bring them on the inside to dry. Now I'm only priming the bottom right now, and once they dry, then I will flip them up and prime the top. Okay, so we're waiting for the clump foliage to dry. We're waiting for the gray primer to dry. So I'll be back in probably 30 minutes. All right, the bottoms of these are dry enough for me to go ahead and move on to the next step, where I'm going to spray and prime the top. I'm going to prime the top with a dark brown, like I normally do with my figures. And then I'll go in and work on the rest of it. Let's just do one thing at a time. Let's go ahead and spray these brown, and I'll be right back. Before I go, I'm just going to let you know I'm using this camouflage. What's it called? It's called Camo Earth Brown, which is actually a very perfect color for like the vines and the wood beams. So we're going to go ahead and let those dry. Alright guys, now what we're going to do is, everything's dry to the point where I think I can go ahead and knock off all the excess clump foliage. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of go through here and rub gently any loose clump foliage. Now I'm using a very soft bristle brush. This is my softest brush. I actually have another brush coming in to do this that's not a makeup brush. When it comes in, I'll do a review of it. It's a brand I've never used before. A lot of times I'll order supplies just as an experiment to see if I like it or not. And I like to share that with you so that you don't have to buy it if it's no good. You know what I mean? Look at all that clump foliage that's just coming off. I really think that clump foliage looks really good as bushes for 15 millimeter. I even put it on my figure bases and everything for 15s. Not so much any of the bigger models. Those I'll tend to use tufts. There we go. Yeah, so that's the hedge. It's got some wild bushes growing up on the inside and outside of the hedge, and it's ready for the vineyard. Okay, let me clean a little bit, and then we're going to get started on that. Okay, these vineyards are dry. They're ready to go. I could texture this and flock it right now and get the vines looking really good, but I don't want to do that. I want to paint the poles a lighter wood color. So let me do that, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so now what I've done is I've used teddy bear tan on the wooden poles, and I used Army Painter's hemp rope on the ropes that go sideways. We're going to apply the dark earth along the bottom. I'm going to be covering the entire stick. And when it comes to the vines, I'm going to try to get some texture paste on it to help secure it as well to the bottom. Alright, let me go ahead and finish putting this texture down, and then I will be right back. Okay, now we got another dry time. I've got to wait for this to dry before I can start flocking the vines, because I'm going to flock the vines and give them a foliage look. But we got to do that after that dries, because I don't want it necessarily sticking to the brown. This is not an Army Painter flock. This is actually a dark green scatter. Alright, we're going to take a brush with this relatively thick Elmer's now, and I'm going to paint. No, I'm not. I'm going to paint the vines both sides, not going all the way to the bottom. You can if you want, that's no problem. And also, if you want to go along the rope some, you can, because the as the vines grow, they also spread. That looks really good. Now I'm sprinkling this over the vines, over the glue. And then you get these vines growing up sides of your vineyards. Okay. And then there's your vines growing up the side of your Alright, let me do all of them, and then what we'll do is we'll show off the entire vineyard once it's complete. And finally, there should be some grass growing under the vine ropes, because the farmers would be walking between the rows and not trampling anything that would be growing under the vines. So we're going to add just some random grass around the stakes, around the vines. Basically just in a straight line. So just like that, with gaps. Just like that, just to give it a little bit of life at the base. Okay, so let me do all of them, and then we'll do some close-ups. Alright guys, the vineyard is finished. This is a ground level view. What I did was I pulled some Macedonian cavalry out just to get a scale, and also some archers. Hopefully the autofocus is working. I'm not at my computer, so I can't actually see what I'm recording here. But you can see that you know, it's a vineyard. We've got the vineyard frames with the crops growing. We got a border hedge, little path going inside. And if you ever need to move something because you have a unit moving through the area, you know, you could just move a couple of the rows out. You know, and if there was a need, you could always also stack, like overlap the bases. I wouldn't do that though. So like if you had a 2-rank infantry unit, all you really need to do is indicate where the front rank is at. Right? And then you could put those back, you know, as needed. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the little walkthrough on how to build an orchard for your 15mm war games. Tell me what you think. Do you like this orchard? Do you have a different way to do it? And what did you like about it? What did you dislike about it? And thank you for coming out and watching this video, and be sure to visit my eBay store where I sell miniatures, hobby supplies, rule books, etc. for wargaming. And if you're interested in maybe me doing a commission for you, contact me at my email address right here. And thank you for coming out and checking this video out, and I'll catch you in the next one.